Hello there, and welcome to Beyond 20's webinar on ITIL 4 Advanced Training, Where to Go After Foundation. My name is Erika Flora. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beyond 20, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. A little bit about me. I've been certified in ITIL since way back, about 15 years ago in version 2. And since that time, I've taught all levels of ITIL training, served as a coach, consultant, you name it, along the way. A few years ago, I was invited to serve as the lead editor for one of the official ITIL 4 books and the advanced ITIL 4 course called Digital and IT Strategy. I'm so darn excited to have David Crouch with me here today because he's a fellow ITIL consultant, instructor, and one of the critical ITIL 4 authors on the Digital and IT Strategy book. So welcome, David. So let's jump into today's agenda. We wanted to answer a lot of the frequently asked questions that we get around ITIL training from all sorts of folks, specifically around the who, the what, the where, the when, and the why, which we're going to turn a bit on its head today and start with the why. Why care about ITIL 4 in the first place? Why care about advanced training, whether it be for yourself or for others? And then we're going to kind of jump past the why and get into the what. So what's the difference between all of the courses? We'll talk about it at a very high level because it's a little bit different than how the ITIL V3 courses were structured. I personally think the ITIL 4 structure is really good in terms of the material and how it's broken up and the areas of specialty of each one. So we'll talk high level and then we'll dig into each one. We will also talk specifically about what you and or your team can expect to learn from each of the classes, what you can hope to get as learning outcomes to bring back to your own organizations. And then we'll dig into each of the roles and say, okay, which one is right for me and what I'm trying to learn, or whether it be in my existing role or in working with other teams, what can help my team and the things that we're trying to achieve. And then last but not least, all of us are going through, oftentimes in our organizations, some sort of transformation, whether it be a digital transformation, Agile, DevOps, DevSecOps, or Lean, and we'll discuss what courses will help us as we kind of make our way through these transformation efforts. So a quick story about Beyond 20, who we are, and how all this ties into what we're going to talk about today. We at Beyond 20 are here to change work life for our customers. And we do that through three things: training, assessments, and technology. The training helps teams speak the same language and help move in the same direction so that we're supporting and aligned to our transformation efforts. We will also talk about, or well, one of the things that we help with is assessments. We do quite a number of assessments, specifically around ITIL 4. We help assess gaps, come in and help determine and uncover what's working, what's not working. We help build roadmaps, and then we also help with technology. We help our customers optimize and automate how they work, and at the end of the day, make meaningful change in their organizations. We are, like this logo shows here at the bottom, we are an accredited training organization, or ATO, through PeopleCert, which allows us to teach the full suite of ITIL 4 courses. And I'm actually most excited about this picture over here on the right. We had always suspected that we delivered the very best training in the world. And a few years ago, we were assessed by an independent third party called Course Conductor, who looked at several hundred of our course surveys, talked with several of our customers by phone and email, and looked at both the learning experience as well as student satisfaction, and found us to be a global market leader. We are very intentional about how we craft and deliver our courses. We use a lot of brain-based learning techniques, and frankly, we've created courses that we would want to take, that are fun, that help concepts stick in our brains, and that allow us to take great ideas back to our workplace. And this is the cover of the book that David and I, along with other authors around the world, contributed to and are really, really proud of. This logo here speaks to the fact that we are ServiceNow premier partner. That's how we help customers optimize and automate work. And last but not least, we are what's called an Axelos consulting partner. We are one of very few in the world that delivers official ITIL 4 assessments. And yeah, that's us in a nutshell. So I'm going to turn it over to David.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the why. Why would you want to do an ITIL training course in the first place? And before we get into some of these slides, I'd be really curious for everybody to help us out here. And the question is, what are some of the challenges that training has helped you to solve, has helped you or your team to solve in the past, or some of the challenges that you believe training may help you with in the future? So if you could, please locate your chat button and just right now type that into chat. So first of all, one question that we get a lot from organizations is, why should I care about ITIL in the first place? What is ITIL? Why should I care about it? Well, ITIL is really, it's been around since the late 1980s. It is really the premier framework for IT service management globally. In fact, as you can see here, in a recent Forbes Insight poll, 88% of IT executives responded that IT service management is important to their digital transformation efforts. When you think about some of the things that people are talking about today, cloud strategies, big data strategies, IT service management, and thereby ITIL, which is one of the best or the biggest and most well-known ITSM framework that's out there, really helps to make that, enable that for you. When you think about other aspects of ITIL, here are some of the big ones that come up a lot, right? So when you send your entire team to an ITIL training class, you help everybody to start beginning to speak the same language, right? So when I say something on my team, somebody from your team means exactly the same thing. And that's not something that we always have if we're not doing that training together. Helps you to really sharpen some of your skills, helps you to gain a greater breadth and depth of knowledge with any of these IT service management subject matter. Number 3 here is a great one. So learning more about some of the tools and techniques for how we can actually change the way we work. ITIL 4 gives us so many more tools than even previous versions of ITIL, even than ITIL version 3 had given us in the past. One thing that we hear a lot is an organization is interested in implementing a new tool. Maybe a new IT service management platform, maybe something with artificial intelligence. That is a great time to have training, not just training on the tool, but maybe even just as important, or more importantly, training on the framework behind it, on some of the practices and processes that really help to make the tool work for you. Organizations that are beginning a large transformation of some type, and we'll talk a little bit more about digital transformation and IT transformation later on, but organizations that are beginning a transformation effort, what better time, right, than to learn more about ITIL. Another thing that people come to us and talk a lot about is, how do I make the metrics and have all of this data? And we talk about database decision making. Well, how do I make it work for me? Am I just measuring something just for the fun of it? Well, hopefully not. Hopefully we're measuring things so that we can change behavior. So ITIL 4 really talks a lot about that. And then certainly making sure that we understand what roles and responsibilities we really need in our organization to make us successful.
And I'll add to that real quickly, David, to what you're saying. It just reminded me a lot of the conversations and discussions that we've had with clients and students along the way, that one of the biggest values of putting a team through training is that you have deeper, more meaningful conversations. And when you're spending a lot of time and energy on, like you mentioned, changing out an ITSM platform or doing a big digital transformation, you save yourself a lot of heartache later on, and you have better conversations. You make better decisions about how to implement some of this stuff, because everyone's on the same page and says, oh, have you thought about this? Or, hey, remember we learned about this. I can't tell you how many clients that immediately come back and go, oh my gosh, we're having night and day different conversations than we had before. And then if you hit the next button here, we just grabbed a screenshot. We use a lot of online tools and activities and things like that in our classes. And these were just a lot of aha moments that we grabbed from one of the activities of, hey, these are the things we want to do differently in our organization, or these are the things that may help us elevate how we work so that we don't just learn the concepts, we actually start to put them to work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about passing an exam, which we'll also talk about. That is part of it. But the bigger part of it is, why am I sending my team to training? I'm sending them there because I want them to change the way they work when they come back, right? And we absolutely, during the class, we make sure that our exercises and everything we talk about comes back to home. Like, why are we doing this in the first place? And even after we do a class, we like to follow up with our clients to make sure that, hey, so you did this training, that was great. Hopefully you had a lot of fun, but are you getting value out of it? Are you actually using it to improve your organization? How can we help you there?
Yeah, and real quick, I wanted to mention some of the stuff that I'm seeing in the chat window because it's really, really great. Around standardization, absolutely. Having everybody on the same page helps standardize how work is done and have conversations around that. Also, I see around integration of frameworks, and that is a great segue to this slide that David's going to talk about, ITIL 4, and I'll steal some of his thunder. Here by saying this, that for the first time ever, ITIL 4 really talks about some of these other frameworks like Agile, like DevOps, like DevSecOps, like Lean, et cetera, and pulls them into what does this mean in terms of how we serve our customers? How can we use all these frameworks together to bring value to our customers? I'm also seeing another comment around training helps mold ITSM strategy at my company. And we have so many interesting discussions around what do we want our strategy to look like now that we have all this new knowledge. How can we change that and make it even better? And then also I see another comment around coordinating workflows. Absolutely, that's something great that comes out of having these kinds of discussions. So I will now shut my mouth and let David talk about this slide here.
No, that's great. I notice especially the one about workflows, so we often talk about repeatable process, right? And the process is great, but what about working across the organization? What about my team working with your team, working with somebody else's team to actually give some value to the customer? That's something that we didn't talk so much about, in previous versions of ITIL, at least not formally, but ITIL 4 addresses that directly. How do we actually work across teams? Some people might be familiar with previous versions of ITIL, ITIL version 2, ITIL version 3. What's new to ITIL 4? Well, at a big picture level, my take on it has always been that ITIL 4 really raises the bar for IT. We always want to do a better job of understanding who our customer is, who is the customer or the business that we're serving, and what do they really need from IT. But ITIL 4 takes that to a new level, really making sure that we are not just supporting the business, we're not just supporting our customer, we're actually there with the decision makers, helping them to make decisions. So along with that, in terms of practices, ITIL 4 introduces some practices that we've never talked about before in the framework, things like organizational change management, right? Getting your people on board, making sure you understand your stakeholders, making sure you're progressing together and that you're understanding any resistance and trying to get people on your side. We already talked a little bit about measurement and reporting. So not just defining kind of meaningless key performance indicators, really trying to find something that is tailored to what your organization needs and that is going to drive changing behavior. Things like workforce and talent management, having the right roles, getting the right people, retaining people, growing their skills, right? Project management, of course, and business analysis. So again, we're not just talking about strictly technical skills here. In fact, a lot of skills that contribute to, understanding the larger business. A couple of the other really big concepts with ITIL 4, really focusing on the customer experience, more so than anything we've talked about before. We talk about, why are we here in the first place? We're here because there's a customer. How do we really understand what that customer needs, what jobs this customer needs to get done? And as Erika mentioned, in previous versions of ITIL, really no mention of things like Agile or Lean or things like DevOps or DevSecOps. And ITIL 4, again, there's very specific classes that hit that right on the head. And no, you don't get Cocoa Puffs if you take one of our classes, but feel free to bring those along or have those in the morning. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the what. So what is actually included in the ITIL 4 framework in terms of training and courses? Overall, first of all, what is the overall certification framework here? So you start really with the baseline ITIL 4 foundation course. And this course really gives you the basic high-level concepts, talks about what do we care about, what do we focus on ITIL 4 in the first place, introduces some new concepts to us, primarily around what are the big picture elements that need to come together to make an IT organization successful, understanding our customer, and then a lot of information on these ITIL 4 practices, right? So basic information around 34, not 34 ITIL practices, there are 34, but around 15 or so different ITIL practices. So once you take the ITIL foundation course, this is a great one for organizations beginning to undergo a transformation, organizations that want to really improve the way they're doing service management, get everybody on the same page, get everybody speaking common language. So once you pass ITIL foundation, then we basically have 2 tracks. So I'm going to start with this track over here, which is called ITIL Managing Professional. There are 4 courses that are part of this. We're going to talk about what's included in each of these courses in just a moment. There is no particular order that you need to do these in. So you can take drive stakeholder value first and then move to high velocity IT and then go to create, deliver, and support. It really doesn't matter which order you take these courses in. Each of these courses has an exam associated with it. We'll talk more about what that entails. But once you take each of these 4 courses and you pass the associated exam, you are automatically dubbed at the end of the day, I knight you ITIL Managing Professional. No sort of capstone exam today to take, no sort of capstone class. You are just considered an ITIL Managing Professional. On this other track, there are 2 courses to take. One is called Direct, Plan, and Improve. If you notice, it repeats on both sides. You don't need to take it twice unless you really think it's fun. No, it is fun. So if you're planning on doing both, you get a 2 for 1 here. But then the other class we really love to talk about is ITIL Leader, Digital and IT Strategy. And this is the one where Erika was the co-editor of this publication. I did a lot of writing on it. Some other folks at Beyond 20 did a lot of writing on this book. And we'll talk more about what that means, but we love that. We love that course. If you take both of these courses over here and then and pass both of the exams, then you are automatically considered what's called an ITIL strategic leader. So who would take what? Big picture here. On the ITIL strategic leader side, and Erika, I think, has a great way of saying it. This is for the folks, typically, the folks who really like this side are the folks who are coming up with a vision. Here's our vision for the transformation. Here's what the direction we're trying to go in. With ITIL Managing Professional, this tends to appeal a little bit more to folks who are saying, okay, now we need to execute on that vision. We need to take that big picture vision and then turn that into something real. Having said that, right, there are plenty of people who take courses from both sides, right, who do both of these tracks. ITIL Master is a certification. There are a handful of masters in the world, but right now there's no real hard and fast requirements around that. I think PeopleCert is probably planning to revamp that, but no real hard and fast requirements around that right now, or at least the requirements that they publish are a little bit dated right now. And then the other thing.
So let me add a little clarity to that. So ITIL V3, there is a master that you can achieve, but ITIL 4, that's still in development. So news to come on that.
And then over here we have some relatively new ITIL extension models. So we have a course on sustainability in digital and IT, and then a course on managing cloud services, so cloud first strategy, things of that nature. And these are two of the newer ones. They've been out for what, about a year or so now, maybe a little bit less than a year. Okay.
Yes, and with those, you don't have any prerequisites. You can take a sustainability in digital and IT without having taken any sort of ITIL training before. The same is true for the acquiring and managing cloud services. So those are new classes, and we're happy to talk more at length about those if you have questions about them.
And by the way, with each of these courses that you take, you will automatically get a soft copy and electronic copy of the source publication associated with that. So if you take, for example, High Velocity IT, you'll get this lovely pink, I think it's pink still, High Velocity IT publication that you have. Another great thing is that every time you take an ITIL Foundation course, you get a year subscription to my Axelos, which gives you access to any number of articles about IT service management. It gives you access for free to all 34 of the practice publications, right? And so every time you take a new ITIL course, you get, you know, that becomes a year-long subscription to my Axelos.
Yeah, and the books, that's a new thing. So if you've taken any sort of ITIL 4 training, I would say prior to this year, that was not included as part of your registration. Going forward, it is for everyone, and that's pretty cool. So after class, if you want to go back and do further reading or go back and refer, like, hey, I remember we talked about X, Y, and Z, there's a lot more detail than we have time to cover in class. It's really, really helpful to have.
All right, so let's talk about here create, deliver, and support. What is covered in the create, deliver, and support class? Really talking about, this is really focused largely on folks who are working in IT operations. You know, I hesitate to say that to some extent because it's really broader than that, but if you're working in IT operations, this is kind of a must-have class for you. It's really about managing your teams, you know, trying to foster a very collaborative culture amongst your teams and throughout the workplace. One of the big things that we focus on in this course is really this, trying to manage queues, right? Manage and prioritize your work. Not too long ago, I wrote a pretty extensive blog article on different ways that we can prioritize our work. And this was a really big part of the CDS course. There's a section of this course devoted to new technologies, right? So digital technologies, robotic process automation, machine learning, chatbots. Just spent a lot of time recently writing about implementing chatbots, artificial intelligence, event management and monitoring. So tons of digital technologies. We focus on a few of them in this course. And then a really big concept here is value stream mapping. So value stream mapping, you know, we talked in ITIL version 3 a lot about having repeatable process. That is a great thing. But what happens when you need to work across teams? What happens when you need to figure out, from my customer's perspective, what's most important to them? How do I work across teams? How do I work across processes? And then how do I make sure I remove any of the sort of waste or non-value adding processes? We also talk about in this course, so each one of these courses talks about focuses on various ITIL practices. In this course, we focus on 12 of the ITIL 4 practices, some of the big ones that most folks know: incident management, problem management, change enablement, knowledge management. So those are a couple of the big ones in this course. And so again, if you're working in and around technology, if you're working on designing and building services, designing and building products, and then trying to make sure that your teams can execute on that, create, deliver, and support is a great class, you know, in that context.
Yeah, and to add to that, we do a lot of activities around building value streams, revamping value streams, so how work flows across teams. And there's a lot more ITIL practices. So what's not on the slide, things like software development, which is a brand new practice in ITIL 4, how that should happen. Release deployment management is there, validation and testing, everything from building SLAs and service level management to monitoring and event management. This is a really, really great I would almost say foundational class in a way, because it gives you a wide breadth of ITIL 4 practices, and you go a bit deeper than you do in a foundations class.
And you know, for my money, you know, the value stream mapping is really you know, critical, right? That's the kind of thing where a lot of the students that come, you know, when I'm teaching a class, they say, you know, I've never really heard of this before, or I never really cared about it before, and now we've learned like why that's so important. And we really focus on this course on two of the archetypal, the basic, you know, value streams of what do we do if we're setting up a new service, and then what do we do if we need to make changes to an existing live operational service. So those are two of the bigger ones that we focus on. Our next course up here is Drive Stakeholder Value, DSV for short. And this one, more than any of the other courses, really focuses directly on the customer relationship. So all of them do to some extent, but this one more than any of the others. How do we even go about, you know, forming or establishing a relationship with our customers in the first place? Once we have a relationship with our customers, how do we make sure that we maintain it? How do we make sure that our customers, you know, continue to work with us, that we understand their changing view of value? So some of the very specific things that we talk about in this course, the customer journey, right? Understanding each time the customer interacts with us, what is that experience like? What is the overall experience that the customer has with us? You know, learning empathy, learning how to create customer personas. These are some of the things that, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, folks in IT maybe didn't think about too much, but we are now called upon to think about these things. Things like human-centered design, right? Trying to come up with good prototypes, defining service level agreements. The basic practices that we cover here, really 8 ITIL practices, and the really big ones and the ones that we've called out here are the ones that really focus directly on the customer. Relationship management. How do we get closer to maintaining a relationship or links essentially with our business or with our customers? Portfolio management. How do we make sure that we're offering the right combination of services and products? Managing our catalog. You know, what do we display to our customers, making it easy for them to interact with us? Service level management, and then dealing with our third-party suppliers, because they have a major influence on our customer experience, even if it's a third-party supplier that we are managing who's delivering the service for us. So this is a super class for anybody who has a really customer-facing role. Again, you know, maybe you don't have a customer-facing role, but this is something you want to learn more about. That would be good too. But if you're a service level manager, if you're a service delivery manager, if, you know, maybe it's not your job, but another role that you play as a relationship manager. I've had plenty of IT executives and directors say that we don't have a formal relationship management practice, but essentially, you know, we have relationships, we have ongoing relationships with our internal business or our customer.
Real quick question that came in around understanding Axelos' position on governance, around things like Microsoft Power Apps, low code, no code, sys, and development, and went on to say that PMI has developed a specific course around that kind of thing. The closest that you would get to those topics, and we do touch on them briefly, is in the prior course we just talked about, create, deliver, and support. There's a whole section where we talk about emerging technologies, emerging trends, and we touch on low code, no code, that kind of stuff. Also, it's a good segue to the next course we're going to talk through briefly around high velocity IT.
And you can see just down here at the bottom of this slide, you know, this is a very small piece of the customer journeys, but we talk about at each stage of the journey that our customer has with us, what very specific things that we need to do at each stage to make sure that the customer is getting value from us.
I see another comment around DevSecOps and actually maturing that with CI/CD. Again, in CDS, we talk a bit about CI/CD, but there's a whole different suite of classes around DevOps fundamentals, DevOps leadership, separate from the ITIL 4 courses, but I think speak to a bit more about what you're talking about. And those are also PeopleCert classes that they offer. Yeah.
Now, Erica is going to tell us a little bit more about high velocity IT.
Yeah, high velocity IT geeks out on a lot of these things that we're talking about. I think it's like 34 different tools and techniques that speak to and do a deep dive into things like containerization, microservices, SRE, really cool content around Toyota Kata and what that looks like and how that's helpful, a deep dive into lean and agile and ways to make services more continuous, how to put more resiliency into operations. And what this class really does is it pulls from a lot of organizations that are digital natives and what they do to really become and maintain high velocity. So it's not just the tools and techniques, but it's also things like, how do you create a culture that has a high level of psychological safety? How do you get rapid feedback from your customers? How do you make better financial decisions on what things to go after? Yeah, so it gets down into the weeds, into a lot of stuff that folks geek out about. Chaos engineering, Chaos Monkey, if you're familiar with that kind of stuff that Netflix does to create more resiliency in their IT operations. It's just a really cool course. So if it's stuff that maybe you're not as involved in, kind of touching on what David said, that it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse, but you're interested in it, this is a pretty fun course as well.
So we have direct plan and improve, and a direct plan and improve is really all about making sure that we are doing great planning at every level of the organization, whether it's the strategic level, the tactical level, the operational level, even down to the team and individual level. The difficulty that we see that a lot of organizations have is they say, well, sure, we do planning. It just happens that our plans aren't really aligned with each other. So the strategic planning is up here. The folks doing the tactical planning are down here. They kind of match up some of the times, but not always. So this class really focuses on making sure that we are planning in the first place, making sure that those plans align with each other. But really big picture, how do we become a learning organization? How do we really focus on getting better all the time? It's one thing to say that, improvement should be part of everybody's job description. It's quite another to actually make that work, right? And, when you look out there at some of the best organizations, I think it's fair to say that those are the ones that are always saying, we're number one, but how can we do even better, right? How can we even, we got to a certain place with what we're doing right now, but is there a way that we can tweak it? Is there a way that we can gradually get better? So, this course really talks about planning. It talks about our strategic direction. It talks about how do we get better over time, but also make sure that we look up sometimes and make sure that our plans are still the right plans to have. I remember years ago, it used to be 10-year plans and then 7-year plans and then 5-year strategic plans. And now maybe it's like a year or something. But the point is we have to look up every now and then and be agile, right? And say that, okay, that plan was great for a period of time, but now we need to understand when to change it. So some of the things that we talk about here, coming up with strategy in the first place, actually executing on strategy, putting together a business case, a justification for why we want to do something, thinking of things like the ITIL continual improvement model. How do we assess our current state? How do we know what kind of a job we're doing with something right now? And then doing essentially a gap analysis to figure out how to get better. We talk a lot about in this course about measurement and reporting. That's probably one of the big areas that from my perspective, if I put on my instructor's hat, a lot of students come and they say, we need to do a better job of measurement. Either we're not measuring anything at all, or we're measuring so much, but sometimes it seems like we're not really using it. We're not doing much with it. So we talk about some techniques to make that better in this class. We talk about things like, using a balanced scorecard. And then, of course, one of the big ones here is organizational change management. Getting people on your side, making sure that you identify your stakeholders. When it comes down to it, continual improvement is really all about change. And it's not just about technical change, it's about changing people's behaviors, changing the way they work. And that, face it, can be a little bit scary, right? Even for people who kind of are leading changes, that can be a little bit scary. So organizational change management, we spend a lot of time on this, really discussing, here are some practical things that we can do to improve our ability to deal with our stakeholders and get people on our side. And this gives you just a little example of, the measurement framework in ITIL.
Just to add to what Dave was saying about direct plan and improve, this is a really good complementary course to the next one that we'll talk about. DPI is about how do I execute this vision, make sure we're going on the right path, be able to change that path and improve. And then digital and IT strategy is really about, it was written by and really meant for leaders that have to come up with a compelling digital vision, that have to deal with disruption all around us, that have to deal with this thing called VUCA. How do we deal with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity? There are specific risks that come with digital transformation and being a digital organization. David will talk about the next slide here around how do we position ourselves effectively and use IT service management concepts to do so. How do we, at the end of the day, become better digital leaders and lead our transformations? How do we help folks through the disruption that comes with changing ourselves and disrupting our own organization? And then there's also a whole chapter devoted to parallel operating models. So how do we change as an organization, but how do we also keep the lights on, keep revenue coming in the door if we're on the private sector? How do we fulfill the mission of our organization while we're also going through disruptive change? So a lot of really cool tools and techniques here as well. We talked to a lot of leaders all over the world to find out what they have found to be really helpful. So we talk about everything from wardly mapping, which is just a whole interesting well behind this concept around how do we strategically win the war that we're going after, and how do we position ourselves strategically. There's business model canvases, objectives and key results. So a lot of times when we're doing things that are the same as what we've been doing, we find a lot of value from defining our key performance indicators and our critical success factors and things like that. When we're trying to do things that are new and innovative, objectives and key results can actually help us define that going forward. And there's a whole bunch of very strategic ITIL practices that we talk about as part of the digital and IT strategy class as well. And this one is actually, of course, we're biased because we're involved in writing the book here.
It's a little.
But the course itself is so different from any of the other ITIL 4 courses because you actually have a case study. Each team and folks are divided up into teams. Each team picks a different case study. So there's 3 different case studies. You work through collaborative exercises. And for any of you, I know there were a couple that have been through ITIL V2 training. It's a lot like the ITIL V2 service manager where you had to actually work through case studies, give presentations, design this stuff. So you're not just learning about the theory, you're actually getting to come up with a digital strategy and talk through it. And there's an exercise where you have to think about and talk through how you would handle all the elements of VUCA. It is so stinking cool. So if you are hoping to be a leader or are a leader, this class just brings a tremendous amount of value. And I will get off my soapbox right now. The end.
I'll step on mine. I'll step on my soapbox. No. I mean, it was a huge amount. It was a lot of fun to be able to work on this publication with really some of the heavyweights in the ITSM world. I mean, all of the books are written by people who have been doing this for a long time, but it was great to see some of the folks who've been doing this for decades even, and, when you look at the marketplace and you Google digital transformation, right, you come up largely with a lot of folks who are just trying to sell you something, right? And that's understandable, but we talk about what does it really mean? What does it really mean to digitally transform? And it's probably not just about buying a particular piece of technology. When you take this class with us, there are some concepts that are in the publication that are just touched upon. This is one of them, the digital positioning model. So when I think about digital transformation, I think about doing business in a significantly different way, using technology to really change the way we're doing business or getting into a substantially new business for us. And it often comes down to trying to improve one or more of these different positions, right? Do I need to find better and more unique ways of meeting my customer where they are and understanding what my customer cares about? Is it for me, if I'm doing a digital transformation, is it a little bit more about operational excellence, really trying to not just do a little bit better internally, but really to try to drive efficiencies internally, to reduce costs, to get more work done, while we're reducing costs? Or is it more about really, I'm a big player in my industry. I just want to leave everybody else in the dust. I want to just totally change the way the industry operates. Or do I really want to offer something that the world hasn't even seen before? And so why do we care about this? Well, different ITIL practices will help to contribute more or less to achieving each of these types of improvement, right? And so this is one of the things that is touched upon in the publication itself, but we don't go into a lot of detail in the publication. When we're in a class, we can talk more in depth in these subjects because we're the authors of it, right? Or some of the authors of it. Now I have a question right now. If Lindsay, if you could launch this poll for us. Are your organizations right now undergoing digital transformations or major transformations?
And just while folks are answering that question, I want to brag on David a little bit. Several years ago, David invented this model in order to support what some of our clients were trying to do with digital transformation. They wanted kind of a roadmap of how can I get closer to where I'm trying to go, and how can I use ITIL 4 concepts to get there? So it's based on this idea of child's play and how we kind of move across the board to visually show where we're going. It's just really cool, and also another deep well that we can go into, but we thought we'd show you a quick slide on it.
Cool. And so survey says, is your organization undergoing a digital transformation? Wow, this is amazing. 83% are saying yes. If you track these over the years, you consistently see that number get higher. That is awesome. Maybe a little bit scary as well. So that's why not a bad idea to get some additional insight into some of what other folks are doing in the world in terms of their digital transformations. Okay, so let's talk really quickly. I'm sure that a few of you are concerned about the exam itself. So for, I noticed that a lot of folks have ITIL foundations under their belts. The ITIL foundation exam is not covered on this slide, but that is a 40-question long exam. You get an hour to take it. It is straight up multiple choice. For the intermediate or the advanced, specialist level exams that we focused on in this session, each of these exams is 40 straight up multiple choice questions, A, B, C, or D, one right answer. You get 90 minutes to do the exam. You may or may not need all of that, but you get 90 minutes to do it. And the types of questions are the ones that you've most likely seen in the past. You get your standard straight up sort of definitional questions. You get your list questions. So of the following 4 different possibilities, which 2 of these are correct? And then of course, everybody's favorite, the all the following except type question, the negative statement, which of the following is not true? So these always require you to slow down a little bit and to think a little bit more. In order to pass these exams, you need to get 28 out of 40 right. That is 70%. And I think it's fair to say that these exams are, they're a level up. They are harder than ITIL Foundation. ITIL Foundation, you get a lot of definitional questions, a handful of really, kind of a little bit harder, more in-depth questions. But with these exams, these specialist level exams, you're turning it up a notch. These are harder exams, a little bit more. How do I apply this concept? Think a little bit deeper on these exams. Now, the digital and IT strategy course is slightly different. You still get a 40-question exam, but during the course itself, you are broken up into different teams. And as Erika mentioned previously, you're going to have a case study, and you have several exercises associated with that case study. So those exercises are graded, and that is also, something that you need to pass in addition to the exam itself.
So just to add to that real quickly, the DITS exam is just a little bit different. I think it's changed a few times over the last couple of years. It is 60 minutes, 30 questions. And you are able to take the exam once you pass the assessment part of the class. So after the class, you'll get a, yay, you passed, or no, we got to do some additional work. And then you take the exam.
Then an important question is to think about, well, who should take these courses? This is what folks always want to know, who should take these courses. And I think Erika is going to take us through a little bit about the right roles or the best roles to take some of these courses.
Yes. So if you have any questions, we want to leave at least 5 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you have. But we tried to put some sample titles as to who might want to take each of the classes. Now, again, it's really important to think about, okay, what role do I have and want to be better at? What role do I have, or what do I want to learn about? So really any person can and should take any of these classes, but these are generally kind of the titles that we see in each of the classes. So super rapid, going from left to right. CDS is great for folks, again, across all of IT that are involved in the day-to-day design, delivery, support of products and services. DSV, we tend to see more customer facing types of roles. So like account managers, service delivery managers, business analysts, that kind of thing. HVIT tends to be more folks that are involved in high velocity types of environments. So we see a lot of folks that are parts of Scrum teams or project managers, program managers, portfolio managers. And then we also see a lot of technical folks. So DevOps engineers, architects, that kind of thing. DPI tends to be more folks that are in this like management layer. And then DITS tends to be more senior leaders. But again, any class is open to any and all folks. These are just the upcoming classes that we have. We teach ITIL Foundations about every 3 to 4 weeks. We teach the intermediate classes. We have a different one, usually 1 to 2 each month, and they're all delivered virtually. Run from 10 a.m. East Coast to 5 p.m. East Coast, so folks from either coast or anywhere in between can attend.
And now we'd love to know what questions you have about this material.
One thing I do want to point as you guys are coming up with questions is we have a really extensive blog on our website. If you just go to beyond20.com/blog, there's one around who should take each of the classes. We also have articles specific to each of the classes that talk through in detail, like here are the key concepts, here's who should take it, here's the importance behind it. Here's how we, in DITS, we talk about just the creation of the book itself and how it kind of came together and the questions we were trying to answer. So I encourage everyone, we are a huge proponent of sharing our knowledge out with folks and writing content that's relevant and valuable. Tons of free resources that you can download from our site. We also have passports. So if you want to get managing professional or you want to get strategic leader, there's a significant discount if you buy the whole package together for the classes. And I think it lasts for like 2 years. You can take the advanced classes. And then there's a question, do we have ebooks for free? So you get 2 things for free. So when you take an ITIL Foundations class, you get access for 1 year. David had mentioned this to what's called My Axelos, which gives you downloadable guides for all 34 of the practices, lots of interesting resources there. You also now, when you take any ITIL for class going forward, you do get the source material. It's like a 200-page book for each of the books that exist that you have as a reference that you just take with you.
It looks like Vernon is asking, although it wouldn't be as effective, could these practices be adopted by some teams or groups if the entire IT organization is not on board yet? Yeah, I mean, I think in practice, that's often the case, right? Where you have a team or a couple of teams who are really interested in improving, really interested in using these practices, but maybe it hasn't been socialized with a larger organization, you can, but then I would say go from there and really try to evangelize this and try to get everybody, incrementally on board with it. That's a great question. Yeah, Lindsay.
Yeah, we have another question. What courses are recommended for organizational change management practitioners that are embedded within IT?
I would say, DPI covers OCM directly. So there's a big section of the Direct Plan and Improve publication that focuses on OCM. I think you get portions of it in some of the other courses. So certainly in the DITS publication, Digital and IT Strategy, we talk about getting people on board for a major transformation. We also talk about in HVIT, Erika mentioned, there's a lot of talk around building a safety culture, a culture where people feel psychologically safe to make changes, to take risk, to take prudent risk. So I think DPI and DITS are probably the two most direct ones, but you do get some of it in the other courses as well. And I also see from Burden, then how does that work for our customers who have different experiences when interacting with us? So I guess, Vernon, this is a follow-on to, is it possible for some teams to adopt these practices and other ones not so much? So yeah, I mean, ideally, right? Ideally, you want to have all of your teams that are kind of on the same page in terms of your overall approach to IT service management. Reality, not every team is going to be necessarily there. That is a great opportunity to try to get those people to come to at least a basic foundation class, maybe some of the intermediate courses, to really talk about, okay, why do we need to be on the same page in terms of our outlook to this? But yeah, ideally you want to have a consistent customer experience.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, the delivering stakeholder value is really, really helpful for folks that care about that customer experience. And we talk through these things called journey maps, which are really illuminating for organizations, because your team might be doing a great job with a customer and you think the customer is amazingly happy, and then you realize they have all these other touch points with the organization and they are not happy, because that is a very bumpy ride along the way. So that's a really good start. I think with anything, the more folks that you can educate in your organization as to what you're trying to do and how you're trying to serve your customer, the more help that's going to have to ultimately, at the end of the day, what matters is how helpful are the products and services that we enable for our customers. Are we bringing them value? Are we moving our organization forward? And the more people you can get on board, the easier time you're going to have with that. But change starts with one person. And expands out from there. We are out of time. I see we have a bunch more questions. I promise we will be putting together a blog article, speaking of giving away our knowledge and helpfulness. So you'll see a blog article from us over the next few weeks. We will also post this video and share additional resources. We are helpful and helping to make the community stronger, better every day. So thank you so much. And please feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Thank you.